we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying. Oh, bye.
Shalom, shalom, family. Welcome to another Tanakh review. My name is Zurishaddai, one of the teachers of Congregation Behar, CHOKMAH, BINAH, located in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, New York, giving all honor, glory, and praise to the Most High God, King of the universe, for life, food, clothing, and shelter, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, giving all honor, glory, and praise to the Most High God for life and for all the things that He does for us in our daily life. Thanking all of you once again for tuning in on this day, as we are on the cusp of as we reach the counting of the Omer, the final counts of the Omer, and we approach the Feast of Weeks. We give glory to the Most High God for this festival that's coming up, and I pray that everyone, whoever is wherever you're observing it, that you have a joyous time. Once again, thanking the Creator of heaven and earth for all things and everything today. And also, I'm thanking all of you that came out to our Unity Shabbat event. We had a great time with family. We enjoyed your company. Thank you all for your contributions, for your donations, for all of the things that you did, acknowledging congregation, Shaddai Shemayim. I never could get the name right, but out in Queens, New York, Shaddai Shemayim, and congregation out in, I believe they're in St. Albans, Queens. Believe it, I know they're in Queens. I'm positive that it's St. Albans, but I could be wrong. Or Hollis, one of those places. But thanking you and the leader of that congregation, Chief Prince Hezekiah Ben Yehudah, and his wife Princess Sarada, for coming through. And you know, we have food, but they always contribute. They come with their contributions, and they made the time even more of fun. So thank you for your contribution, the members who did come out. And also I'm thanking my brother Zurishaddai from California, who him and his family popped a whole bunch of kettle popcorn, sent it to us. I seen the bill, how much it cost for it to be shipped. 2 big U-Haul boxes, sent it out to us, and they said they wanted people they wanted to contribute, since I guess he wasn't able to make it, him and his family, him, his wife, and his children. So they popped a bunch of popcorn, put it in plastic bags, over 100 popcorn, I believe, and sent it to us, and the people enjoyed it. We had to give it to the people on their way out, because we don't want a bunch of popcorn on the floor during the services. So the people enjoyed it. All the 2 boxes of popcorn went, and I seen kids eating it at the end of the actual Shabbat, and some of that popcorn still got on the floor. So, but people enjoyed it, and we appreciate all of you, and all of you who came out and donated. The ones that didn't donate, we thank you from the bottom of our heart, because there's nothing better than unity. It is said is to be like the precious ointment that ran down the skirts of the high priest. So we pray that the Most High God will continue to bless each and every one of us, and allow us to continue to have events as such, to be able to uplift His name, and to be able to be amongst each other. So if you were there, if you were not, so you know you saw one of our teachers, the one who actually teachers in this program, one of my teachers and one of my mentors, Nasik Zurishaddai Ben Yehudah, he will be breaking down the portion, and I'll give him the podium. Shalom, Nasik. How are you?
Jacob. Jewish Vector Platform on D.C.B channel platform, spiritual lead chief Prince Ariel Ben Yasaska, the whole Shifu Zael, to the Princess Chief Coney, Rabbinate, Maureen, brothers and sisters, we greet you all in the name of forefathers, Shalom Aleichem, and early Shabbat Shalom. And I'll say Adonai Sabtai Ditakufia Giti Latheka, Allah down my lips, my mouth should declare praise. I'll be going over, it's a double portion closing out the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, which is Behar and Bechukotai, which is two interesting portions, and it's coming at the end, and it's also it's also somewhat related to the season in somewhat. It has a lot of similarities to what we're doing now as we count the Omer and stuff like that. So we do a lot of counting, so, and one of the things is those that showed up at the event at D.C.B, it was a marvelous, I had a marvelous time coming up. Come all the way from the warm climates to this cool climate. I had a great warm reception. So it went as far as it could go before I had to put on the extra coats and stuff like that. But anyway, it was I had a great, marvelous time there, and those that know when we come dealing with this particular portion, that we be counting, and so we was D.C.B and other people, we were able to count on one another, and we also in a period of counting still of the Omer, and then the Creator is always about inventory and accounting, even when as we ended Petco Day, which was the last book of Shemot, Exodus, that we deal with counting. And so we count many ways, many facets, and for many reasons. So the Sidra starts from the 25th chapter of Leviticus, and it will conclude with the end of the 27th chapter of Leviticus. We run through some hard, what they call tokakot. Tokakot is actually admonishment. Things in reference to what would happen if we didn't observe certain things, certain laws of the Creator. So Behar means in the mountain, and in Bechukotai means statues. In my statues. So let me just go through it and highlight. Now, this comes on the back of a last portion when we was talking about actually a blasphemer. So we transition from a blasphemer, to mayhem and all that, and then now we're talking about going into the land, and so it seemed like a little bit of an interruption, in the mode of Leviticus, and then we jump, into certain things to try to quell certain mayhem, because sometimes people do things in a fit of anger, and then they start, it becomes volatile in that sense. So now, as we look at, we're cautioning you about how to, not to get too riled up with your neighbors and friends. And if you did, it'd be consequences there. All right. So now I want to speak on this particular portion as we open up the book in Leviticus, the 25th chapter. And it said, "And the Lord spoke to Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying to them." Now, this law that we have, and almost all the laws that we talk about, was given at Mount Sinai. There's very few laws that wasn't actually given at Mount Sinai. One of the things you could, just for instance, is when the 5 daughters of Zelophehad wanted to inherit their father's inheritance. So that's one of the laws that wasn't given at Mount Sinai, given in the wilderness, of course, but not at upon in Mount Sinai. So Moses got a lot of laws, and almost all our laws, for the majority, was given in Mount Sinai. So now, if it's given in Mount Sinai, then what the order is not always chronological. When we start to discover some of this stuff that we got to apply to ourselves. But for the most part, we can make a storyline from the heading of everything from Teruma all the way up to the time, when we enter the land. Just a storyline, just on the actual titles of each parshiot. But one of the interesting things when we're just leaving and we're coming from the back of blaspheming and chaos, is that when we think about the individual that blasphemed the name of the Creator, and as we left in that, and then with a lot of chaos, no people of antiquity that we could read about ever would entertain the concept of cursing their deity. No, that just was been too absurd. Because if it's your deity, and if you are actually, and your deity actually more powerful than you, how could you curse something more powerful than you? How could you hurt something much more powerful than you? So even the concept, where the Creator brings out in a man that, curses, is God should bear his sin. But if you curse the Lord God of Israel, and the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, stranger or homeborn, Israelite or not, you're put to death. Because the concept was inconceivable. We didn't have people really considering themselves in ancient times atheists. Everybody thought of something higher, or had a spiritual side of something higher and outside of themselves. So for that concept, even in the Decalogue, when we were talking about in Mount Sinai, it was not to take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, but to curse the Creator. That's a whole nother thing, another area. Now, when they talk about cursing the Elohim, the gods, and that's used in the sense of judges, in that sense, because they have the power, to affect your life, sometimes even the power of life and death over your life if they litigate and your case. So this what a different area, but when you consider like sun, moon, idol worshipers, which is not a god, that concept didn't exist within most of the ancient world, and this is the first time we even have an idea that anybody even do anything. You had a lot of wicked people that do whatever they want to do. We even had people that had an issue with God when we built the Tower of Babel, but that concept didn't exist. The curse God. That just didn't exist. So that's a novel thing in here. So now we got this law about when we come to the land, it's supposed to be told the children of Israel and speaking to them, when you come into the land, I'll give you, then you shall the land shall keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the produce thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath unto the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of itself of thy harvest, thou shalt not reap, and the grapes of thy undressed vine thou shalt not gather. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. And the Sabbath produce of the land shall be for food for you, for thee, and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for the settlers by thy side that sojourn with thee, and for thy cattle, and for the beasts that are in the land, shall all the increase there be for food. Now, what's interesting is that I often bring out, they talk about a Sabbath before they talk about the work. And usually the process is you work before you observe a kind of Shabbat. And I'm normal 6 days a week. You work, and then you talk about the Shabbat, and we were talking about a sabbatical year earlier, but now we're going to get into the details of the sabbatical year. But what's even more interesting is that it says when you come, as you told this in the mountain, you're not even told this in the land. He told us in the mountain, and this could have actually been stated once Joshua crossed over into the land. And one of the reasons why it could have actually been stated after he crossed over the Jordan in the land, and you could always discuss it further, with your teachers and stuff, is that this is unique. That if we talk about a sabbatical year, you only could count a sabbatical year once you cross into the land and plant. So it's based on when you start to plant. When you start get 6 seasons of harvest. So that means that once you get into the land and once your crop grow, then that's when the sabbatical year actually starts. It's not starting because we crossed over the Jordan and we entered the land with Joshua at that time. It don't start right then. Though we ate other crops of the field, it don't start right there. It actually starts when you actually put work in the land. So that's some of the strange things that you talk about. So so Shabbat is not the intern getting to the land and planting and harvesting. It's not the intern. We could talk about the Shabbat on both ends. The Shabbat when it mentions in the beginning of the chapter, and then it talks about the Shabbat for the land itself, and it tell you that though when you come into the land and it deserves this, it's Shabbat, it tells you in reference to the sabbatical year that who this crop belonged to. You don't have it on. It's communal property, and it's not only community property. The beasts of the field have claim to the property that is part of your heir. So that means technically we don't own the land. We're caretakers of the land. We're sojourners with the Creator. And also the land belongs to the Creator. So what it teaches you is also that you got to be thankful. And then when we talk about rest, the land, a day off, what's the purpose of the rest? This is some of the things we got to look at. Why do we need time out? And the time out is stated, that we need time. When you eat, say eat to live, and you live to eat. Which one is it? So some people eat to live in order to live to serve the Creator. That's the most, dynamic thing. Eating to live in order to serve your Creator. So therefore, the focus is when you get that sabbatical year, you have no work in the field. You don't have no stress on you. So now you and your family could focus on the will of the Creator of heaven and earth. And this is a marvelous thing when they talk about it. But now we're going to the 8th verse of that same chapter, and it says, "And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years, and there shall be unto thee the day of 7 Shabbats." All right? The days of 7 Shabbats. We are, of years, even 40 and 9 years. So in that 8th verse, when you're talking about counting the 49 years, we count 49 Omer. And then on the 50th, people say, do we count the 50th? We count 7 weeks of 49 days. That's what we literally count. We count 7 Shabbats of 49 years. That's what we literally count. you know. And also, the thing is about participation. You know, we got to participate in our county as we count the Omer and as we count the sabbatical years. So just like we counting from the start of the gratitude of the Most High with the Omer, we're actually counting from the start and when we seeded the land and we reap the harvest. You know, so that's we got some unique things that's going on here. That I'm just going to rush it because I was started a little late. So again, and the 9th verse, it says, "Thou shalt make proclamation with the blast of the horn on the 10th day of the 7th month, in the day of atonement shall you make proclamation with the horn throughout all your land, and shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and ye shall return every man unto his family. A jubilee shall that 50th year be unto you. And ye shall not sow, neither reap that which groweth of itself in it, nor gather the grapes in it of the undressed vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy unto you. You shall eat the increase thereof out of the field." All right. And before I get to the 13th verse, I want to focus on a couple of things before I get to the 13th verse. And this is a unique institution as we go forward. Is that when we think about the counting of the seven Shabbats, so that means we let the land rest, 7 times. Every time the 7th year comes, we don't work the land. The land gets rest, but when we get to this season of Jubilee, the 50th, is a whole nother thing. And what's interesting, it's a lot of interesting facts going on, is that if the 49th year is a land that's resting, but the 49th year is not the Jubilee, because the 49th year is that sabbatical year. So the Yovel is different in a lot of ways, and they have a little similarity with a regular sabbatical year. And the Yovel itself, more things is, more laws enacted in the Yovel. Whereas in the sabbatical year, only certain things are enacted in dealing with the land. So, and so the sabbatical year only deal with the land. The Yovel deals with the land and people, so it covers the whole society as a whole. Whereas, though people could grab, food and, on the sabbatical year, they still have debt, so if most countries follow this formula, then we won't have people, in debt forever. You could be in debt forever, and you could be, put on a list where, okay, your credit is so damaged that you don't have a fresh start. Here you have a recycled start if we follow this here formula. But what's interesting also when we talk about that is that it mentions the actual blast of the shofar. Now we observe Yom Teruah, Yom Zikaron, and we which is in the 7th month, the first day of the month. Today, rabbinically later on they say Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, which is a whole nother, different concept. But some people call it Rosh Hashanah, but it's actually in the book. It's called Yom itself, Yom Teruah. So if it just say Yom Teruah, it just say a day of blowing or a memorial of blowing, but it doesn't tell you when that 7th month come up in the first day of that 7th month, that what to blow. That's only an oral interpretation, a rabbinic interpretation, where you actually say, I'm going to blow the shofar. Why that instrument? All right, instead of any other instruments, where we had 2 silver trumpets, but that the priest only blew. But here you got the day of the memorial of the blowing, and you say you're supposed to remember a blowing on Yom Teruah, and that's the Rosh Chodesh, which is the first day of the 7th month. And what is thing to consider as we go about interest in there is that you could be what happened? You could blow a flute, a clarinet, or you could blow a horn. Why here it tell you and uses the word shofar, and a shofar is a horn of an animal. So why the animal horn that's used here instead of the actual silver trumpets that the Kohanim actually had to blow for assembly and on all our feast days and holy days? So because we're going to read about this, we read about the silver trumpets later on when we go in the book of Numbers at the 10th, around the 10th chapter, I believe, offhand. And so why not specify those individual things that's holy and sacred and only for the Kohanim? So those are some of the things that to consider, and you can further discuss them with your various teachers in your various congregation, and stimulate conversation and say, well, would it be beneficial to society or not beneficial to society? Because then now in the 40th year, you got 2 years that you ain't working the field. So what you doing for those 2 years? That's a long vacation time. And yet you still have the old other holy days coming up within that 49th year, which comes up every year. Pesach gonna come up every year. Shavuot coming up every year. Sukkot coming up every year. And yet it picks a unique day. It picks the day of Yom Kippur to declare this. So that means the sabbatical year and the Yobel year is focusing around when you get a fresh start spiritually, with the Creator and say, look, I'm gonna try to do better. So the real resolution and revolution in your life is focused around every 7th year, which is more intense than the regular yearly Yom Kippur. And you figure then when you say Yom Kippur, when you afflict your souls, how can you be afflicted and you're joyful at the same time? You're hearing the Yovel being blown, but you're afflicted and you're so joyful at the same time. And when people say, oh, Yom Kippur, you shouldn't be sad, a lot of people will look, especially the children, I wonder, how you mean I'm not supposed to be sad? I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I'm hurting. And I'm not supposed to be sad? Oh, it's supposed to be for a good reason. Okay, I know it's for a good reason, but do I feel good about the reason, doing it? So these are some of the things that go through, people's minds from time to time, kids and, especially children and young folks. We all, know that the reason of fasting, afflicting our souls on Yom Kippur was, to be able to show that we want to be close to the Creator and we want to be forgiven for the Creator. And also we want to be on a good term with the Creator. So now you're celebrating, because now when we get into the next verse, the 13th verse of this here particular portion, it's talking about, return to your possession and all that stuff. It says in the 13th verse, in this year of Jubilee, you shall return every man unto his possession. And if thou sell aught unto thy neighbor, or buy of thy neighbor's hand, you shall not wrong one another. According to the number of years after the jubilee, thou shalt buy of thy neighbor, and according to the number of years of crops, he shall sell unto thee. According to the multitude of the years, thou shalt increase the price thereof, and according to the fewness of years, thou shalt diminish the price of it. For the number of crops doth he sell unto thee. And ye shall not wrong one another, but thou shalt fear thy God, for I am the Lord your God. So when we look at and I'm not going to read all this about the redemption process and all the stuff that goes on in the Yovel and also I dedicate certain things. You cover a lot of stuff in this particular area, but when we focus on this here, it said we actually when I buy property from my a neighbor, because he might not be good at farming, or he might just have some hard times, and say, look, just give me some money and you work the land. I'm buying it according to the crops I got to harvest in it. So now, if he sold me the land because he's on hard times, and this what some of the things that's covered in here. So there's so much stuff here about I won't be able to cover it, but everybody that's interested about business dealings with one another, this shows you the fairness and the righteousness of dealing in business all the way across the board in every facet of life. When you think of when you read this particular portion here, so and it's funny because it's how you deal with individuals, intimately, declare whether you're righteous or not. That's bottom line in that. So now, can you imagine that you buying? If God sold me the field, when He sold me the field, He sold it to me, and said, okay, I got into the sabbatical year, at least, to hold it, work it. Now He actually selling it to me until the Yovel. But so now, say He sold it to me in the 5th year. And then I got 1 year to actually, get anything from it, and then I got to let it lay dormant in the 7th year, and yet it's still maybe another 14 years to the Yovel. So it goes by the number of crops. Now, suppose you don't have any crops. Things to be discussed, because we know we have famines in the land. Suppose you don't have any crops, or other scenarios. You don't work the land, got everything primed up, and the guy come back and said, "Look, I got the money. Yeah, so and so gave me some money, from a family inheritance. So here, I want my property back." Now you don't hooked it up and everything, got everything ready. You haven't gotten any crop yet, but the owner, the guy who actually had owned the land, said, "Look, I'm gonna give you your money back. I'm buying back." After that, he got to pay for your work that's invested in it and the crop that would have been, because that work is invested in crop. Now he don't know if the crop's going to come through or not, because we have famine in the land. So there's a lot of issues for dealing with the Yovel, but it's a business deal, and the Creator is teaching us how to deal with business in all walks of life here. So that's one of the most important areas there. I'm going to skip on through, before I skip on through, and it's also an institution about slavery. And one of the major things is that, proclaiming liberty, that means people, not only relinquishing land back to the rightful owners, but you actually, if a Hebrew servant, now this is a Hebrew servant, and it's an interesting concept of slavery, and I'm gonna call it, what it is, slavery, but the way, you treat your slave and the power that you actually exercise over your slave, according to the scriptures, is far different than the slavery that we know in other societies, especially in America. So it's far different. So even the Egyptian slavery wasn't quite as rough as American slavery, nowhere near. And yet they had the power of life and death over their slave, but it was still nowhere near the same level. But even when we talk about releasing an individual, when a Hebrew servant, we read earlier about if you buy a Hebrew servant in the book of Exodus, Sitra Mishpatim, 21st chapter, that if you buy a Hebrew servant, that he was served for 6 years, and the 7th year he go free. Now, his freedom is not predicated on the sabbatical year. So I want to make that very clear, because the sabbatical year could be 3 years away, but you brought him for, the 6 years, and the 7th year he go free. So if you come in the 3rd year of that, of the sabbatical year, that don't tell him that, oh, I just did 3 years, so I'm out, because 7 years here. No, that means right then and there, your time haven't started. Now, if the Yovel came in 3 years, then he got to go. So it's a real technical thing in dealing and buying. And that's why I'm talking about, averaging out the time and the value, what you'll get. And so the people wouldn't be so reluctant to do business with one another, because you got a right to make a profit. But, and then those that follow, rabbinic law would know they have a certain scale. But I'm not dealing with that, speaking to a general audience here. But they have a scale for how much profit a person should justifiably have or make. So those are some of the areas that we're talking about, that a Hebrew servant, if he's wanted to say, I love my master and my children, that I would serve my master for, I want to serve my master, and they take an oar to his ear and punch a hole in his ear. And then after that, it says serve his master forever, but forever means until the jubilee, the Yovel, and then even he himself goes out free with his family, everything go out free. So, and there's a lot of technical stuff here in this particular portion, which I know time will allow me to even touch the surface of a lot of technical stuff involved with that. So it's good worthy going over it for society to function greatly. It got to function in the realm of righteousness. So if you look at, and we got treatments of the servants, compassion for the poor. But I want to go into this last portion. I'm going to skip over to the 26th chapter. And in the 26th chapter, it focuses on laws against adultery. And, I'm talking about, you shall not make no idols, neither shall you rear up a graven image or a pillar, neither shall you place a figure stone in your land to bow down unto it, for I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. So now, after talk about all this about, redemption of servants, talking about redemption of the houses, and all this, it goes on to say about idols. And you will say, now, what do that has to do with what we just were talking about, sabbatical year? And I got to emphasize sabbatical year, because it starts only once you start to plan. So that means when the children of Israel enter, everybody should be planting at the same time. Dan can't talk about, well, we're gonna plant in a couple of years, and Judah said, look, we're planting right away, and then Manasseh say, well, we're gonna only wait about 6 months in. No, everybody got to start. When we go in there and settle and conquer the land, and we first sow in the season of Eve, then we sow our seed rather. Then we count is for everybody. Now, did everybody keep the sabbatical year? Well, we know it was kept, but we don't know if how wide it was kept. And when they came back from Babylon, they observed it for a count, but they actually couldn't enforce it all the way because it was still a lot of the Israelites throughout, the diaspora, because everybody didn't come back. Few came back to Jerusalem under the edict of Cyrus the Great. And for years, for centuries, the land was occupied by a lot of other people. So they really didn't dominate the land to that degree. Even in the Hasmonean period, they had issues here and there. But but they keep a count. So, and it's another issue, with the way they do the count now, because they have marked the sabbatical year, but there's always an issue about the Yovel, and say, how could you, deal with the sabbatical year and we don't deal with the Yovel to that degree? Though they keep the record of time for the Yovel, because we know when we read the book of Ezekiel, different times they talk about from the X amount of year, the 30th year, the 25th year, such and such, and so and so, the captivity or the reign, and such and such. That means that they marking from the last Yovel that they observe. So they actually observe a Yovel. And then one of the major things now is speculated, hard press, but it's common that Zedekiah, when he supposed to made a covenant with God for Nebuchadnezzar and them to turn around and go back, his army to go back, that one of the things was they could proclaim liberty throughout the land, and when all the servants go free. And then they turn around and take the servants back. Now, what's interesting also about, before I go into this other portion just a little bit, I'm really just going to condense it, and you have to forgive me. So, because, but I'm going to condense it, the second portion of it. That was interesting enough. Now, say you, as a person, could buy a foreigner, a stranger, and I want to omit that. If he's not an Israelite, not from the 12 tribes, and he's from, say, Moab or, Egypt, and you brought him as a servant, a slave, he does not go out in the year of the Yobel. He become part of the household, property. So that means that, say you brought a guy named, Tutu. You brought Tutu, and when you brought Tutu, as a slave, Tutu is passed on. You say, okay, if I pass on Tutu, and if Tutu have kids, whatever kids, they all of them belongs to your, as part of your property, and goes to the next generation. So when you think about that, think about slavery in America, so to speak. I mean, it's can be considered a bittersweet thing. So think of the way the Torah describes slavery here, and who you can actually own, and then you think about American slavery and stuff, and discuss that, because I'm sure it'll be a lot of deep emotional discussions, about humanity and stuff like that, whether it's fair or not. So God allows certain things, but do he approve of certain things? So a lot of times we'll read certain things in the book that's allowed, but is it the ultimate approval, of that particular thing? So those are things that, need to be, discussed a little bit more. And so he's passed down, and he never go out. So your grandchildren will have their children as servants. And then another thing before I move on is that, say a Kohen, he had purchased an individual. Now, he can't purchase a Hebrew, but in that sense where he can own it forever. But he purchased, Egyptian. He purchased an Egyptian as a slave. And why would a Kohen need a slave? Because while he's doing this kahuna stuff, he's taking care of stuff around, the Mishkan, which is the tabernacle at that time, or later on the temple. Then he needs somebody to work and handle the stuff that he's neglecting at home in his personal life. So he buys a slave, and it could be an Egyptian, and when you have the Egyptian slave, all the food that the Kohen eat, that he could eat, that slave can eat. He's an Egyptian. A Levite can't eat it. An Israelite can't eat it. But the slave, the Egyptian slave of a Kohen that he purchased, he's become now part of his household. So think more deeper than when you discuss that thing about, the slavery institution. He become part of that household. So you got to watch marriages too, because if a guy be part of the slavery household long enough, a few generations, somebody might say, look, we really ain't blood family. So you got to watch that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm saying is, there's a lot of discussions that could go on in reference to that. So if that slave run away from his master, which is the priest, the Kohen, and he goes someplace else. Now, you can't bring him back now. He ran away, and and he comes to your property, and you say, okay, I done planted this here, and this is part of the terumah offering, and the terumah offering is only for the Kohanim. That slave that ran away could technically eat that fruit, that terumah, even though he's not over there with priest so and so. He's not over there with that. He could eat that grain, that terumah, that grain that you have designated for the Kohen, simply because the Kohen brought him, and he's actually part of that household. Though he ran away, he's still part of the household. You can't bring him back. It's part of the household. Perhaps if you eat that, he might feel, thing turned back. We could come with a whole lot of stuff like that. But he's actually still part of the household. You can't eat it. So you got to feed him what you can't eat. Like if he's the Kohen, because he's part of the Kohen's family now. So it's a lot of laws. And one of the things when we deal with the sabbatical year, most laws, we got to deal with oral interpretation. We got to, wrap our head around this and wrap our head around that. When it comes to the sabbatical year and the Yovel, that is clear cut Tanakh. We don't have to do no whole lot of, conjecturalize and say, okay, we're going to look at this metaphorically. This is one of the most clear-cut episodes of Torah that we read about dealing with the sabbatical year and the Yovel. And this is about action, physical action. Spiritual concepts is stuff you might have to wrap your head around. When I'm stealing something, that's stealing the idea with it, but might be plagiarism. This is real clear cut when we deal with that. So that's all I'm gonna speak on that. It's a lot more, but it's a lot more I'm gonna speak on that. So now we're going to Bechukotai, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of things in Bechukotai, and forgive me so I can finish this out. And Bechukotai, it talks about blessings, and it got the 13 verses. The first beginning of Bechukotai, 13 verses, give or take, which it starts from the third verse of the 26th chapter, and it goes all the way to the 13th verse. So 10 verses, excuse me. So you got 10 verses from the third verse of the actual 26th chapter to the 13th verse. All that's good. All that's real good. You know what I mean? And I'll just read the first one. It says that third verse, it says, if you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments, and do them, then I will give your rain and their season, and the land shall yield her produce, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. All right, so that's right. So when we talk about the statutes, Bechukotai, these are some things that we have laws, kokeems, laws that we really don't see certain rationale behind, but we definitely have a concept of we need rain. We can't make water, and it's related to if we do certain things, participation. So we study and Bechukotai, and it says walk. As we walk in my statutes, that means right then and there that the beginning of Bechukotai is that, one, I got to read and study Torah to do. I just don't talk about, I read Torah, I know Torah. I study in order to apply it to myself. That's what we're supposed to do. We study Torah to apply it. So in order to walk in the statutes, the things that we really understand, we first see what we're supposed to do, and then we, apply it, and participate in it. So that's one thing. And in the 13th verse it says that I am the Lord your God who brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, that ye shall not be their bondsmen, and I have broken the bars of your yoke and made you go upright. So we was liberated from Egypt because of what God had a promise in. Now, it's an interesting thing here, Bechukotai. They got a lot of things about pursuing disobedience. One of the things about the obedience in this here that I gloss over is that they're talking about 5, chasing 100, and 100 chasing 10,000. Usually 100 should, the math should be about 2,000 up for 100, but it shows that the actual participation of more as a group, allows you to achieve more. So where 5 is a group of people, but they only gonna achieve so much. But the more groups of people that come together, you achieve exponentially much, much more. So and then it goes on. It talks about the actual things for disobedience, punishments. And these punishments go, 7 times 7. So when we look at the punishment, I'm just going to talk about it right now because I don't have that kind of time yet. When we talk about the punishments here, it lists 49 different types of punishments in this particular portion of Behar. But when we get to Kitavo, when you come into the land, when you go into the land, so when you come into the land, Kitavo, start around, I think, the Deuteronomy 26th chapter. But that particular portion is almost reminiscent of this particular portion here that we read about right now in Behar, in the combination of Bechukotai. So they mentions in that particular portion, when we get to the Deuteronomy 28, it mentions 98, curses, problems, where here it is in this particular chapter, it only mentions 49. So 2 times 49 is 40, it's 98. 49, we talk about the 49th year, we talk about the 49th Omer. It has a great, great significance. So within it, within that particular number. But 49, so because we're supposed to be developing ourselves during this particular season. And we always read this here when it's around close to Shavuot, between Lag, Be'oma in the Shavuot. We always tend to read this here particular portion around that time. And so it enumerates all these here different curses and stuff like that there. And 49 of them So you might want to go over them later on. And this is actually more, even though it's 49, it's actually more devastating than what we're reading Kitavo. So when you make the comparison later on, which I don't have time to go through it now, but when you get a chance, it's heart-wrenching reading, but it's necessary for development. So you could go over all those particular portions there. As we get to the 27th chapter of Leviticus, it speaks on vows of persons. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak unto the children of Israel, say unto them, when a man should clearly utter a vow of persons unto the Lord according to thy evaluation, then thy evaluation shall be for the male 20 years old, even unto 60 years old. Even thy evaluation shall be 50 shekels of silver after the shekels of the sanctuary." Now we know, before we go any further, that we was counted with a half a shekel men of war, 20, 20 and upward. When we started to count, for a census. So census was taken various times. But then it says, and if it be a female, then that valuation shall be 30 shekels. Now, when we think of monetary vow, and you say, well, most people, let's look at the numbers. A man at the same age is from 20 to 60 is worth 50 shekels, which is an exorbitant amount back in them days. And a female is only worth 30 shekels at the same age. Is it saying that she's, that she's really that much insignificant? No, it's not really pointing out that. Her role will be in another area, but she has value. But so, when we talk about evaluation of the man value is mostly outside the house, not in the house, not in the home. It's outside the home, while her value is more inside the home. So when you talk about a vow, you talk about something outside. Outside, the man value will be much more increased. Inside, its worth is very little compared to the woman, I would dare say. But so if a woman going to push herself outside, you only worth 30 shekels in a sense of vow. And it goes into a whole lot of other areas there, which I'm not going to be able to touch on in a few minutes. I'm going a little over time right now, but I want to just bring out this particular point. And this evaluation what the Creator come up with. So you're worth something, it even goes into a month old, in the 6th verse said, if it says, and if be from a month old, even unto 5 years old, then thy valuation shall be for the male 5 shekels of silver, and for a female, thy valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. So it's the reasons why this is done, in there, and one of the things is that you say, well, what do a baby at a month old, that he's going to be an expense. A female, a month old, going to be an expense. And it says only worth, 5 for a male and 3 for a female. But the argument is never with me or anybody readers. The argument, and I know I heard it before. A lot of people say, "Well, man wrote the book. Man wrote the book." These are the numbers that the Creator and tell you in the opening that this is what He wanted to be said, and this is how we talk about a vow, and it's dealing with vows and stuff of that nature. All right, so and it tell you about it goes into about vows, for offering beasts and everything like that. Vows of houses, vows of farmlands, firstlings of beasts, devoted things. Now, as I said before, there's a difference between holiness, being something holy, and something that's righteous. And most people think it's always synonymous. But righteousness is an active thing, what you actually do. Holiness is something that's designated for because of the Creator said thus and thus is holy. And We only get the concept of holiness once. The first time we even hear anything about holy is when Moses encountered the burning bush. We never heard that concept used before, holiness, until Moses stood there and he said, remove, and he went to see this great sight, and they called Moses, take off your shoes, for the ground you stand on is holy ground. Now, how long it stayed there holy? That's another story. But that's the first time. So holiness is based, we had an institution, it's based on around the sanctuary. Not just repentance, it was a place where a man could develop and repent and get himself back spiritually in the sanctuary, which is something that never existed before, but also the concept of holiness available on earth, at a stable place, was actually instituted once we did the Mishkan, and then later on a permanent spot, which is once we built the temple. So that's important. So that's why it's, when they tell you that, keep my Shabbats and reverence my sanctuaries, that means right there that the Shabbat is also an institution that's important, but it helps develop you. And also the place, to stay close to and to create a place closer to your base, your source. And then the last verse, I want to read that. These are the commandments which the Lord commanded Moses for the children of Israel in Mount Sinai. So what is interesting is that this particular two sidrotes, Behar and also Bechukotai, Sahar and Bechukotai, it starts off in a mountain, opening verse, and it ends in the mountain. So what we find that once again, most of our laws that we know was learned and picked up in the mountain at Mount Sinai. Only very few we picked up on the move, but the majority was on Mount Sinai. You figure manna, that's on the move. That's so. And also, like I said, when we talk about the manna, that's on the move. And that's the only thing we can work with. So with that, I hope you got something on what I said. I know I went a little quick today, but any questions, just leave it in the chat. Any mistakes have been my own, and everybody have a great, counting, because now not only we do a spiritual side, and we already into when I'm doing this talking right now, we already begin our 6th week of counting the Omer. So, and we're going to count down now to where we actually starting to develop, our highest level of emotional sanctity, because we're talking about the emotions of the heart. And with that, I say Shalom Aleichem and early Shabbat Shalom, and any mistakes from my own.
Torah by Nasik, thank you. Giving all honor, praise, and glory to the Most High God. Thank you all once again for joining us. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And I pray that the Creator of heaven and earth be with you all. Shalom, shalom. Hallelujah.
Let's get knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The CHOKMAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders. Yeah, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The CHOKMAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders.